We have two investors here, and let's write this out. Let's write year 0. That's going to represent, this is the time, this is the day when the person invested their money. And then year 1, that's going to represent the period 1 year from now. And year 2, that's going to be the period 2 years from now. Now let's talk about investor number 1. The first person invests $1,000, okay, and earns an interest rate of 10%. So after 1 year, suppose he invests this in a savings account, which is in the real world not a good example because interest would be more like 1%, not 10%. But let's just pretend. 1 year from now, in the bank, he would have not $1,000, but $1,000 times 1.10, where 10 is the 10% interest. And the 1 essentially just accounts for the $1,000. So what do I mean? The amount of money he has in the bank now is the original $1,000 that he invested plus 10% of that. What's 10% of $1,000? $100. $100 in interest. So at the end of the year, he now has $1,100 in the bank. All right, year 2. Another year goes by. He keeps the money in the bank. He earns another 10% on it. So now he has what? He has $1,100 from last year. Earns another 10%. Well, how much money is that? So it's the $1,100 he had last year. Plus, we'll write interest in blue again. 10% of $1,100, that is $110. So at the end of 2 years, he now has $1,210 in the bank. And again, not realistic to say the bank, you wouldn't make 10% interest in your savings account. It would be more like 1% nowadays, but I think it's just easier to imagine putting the money in a savings account. Now, before we move on to our second investor, let's just look at this a little bit more. In year 2, or after 2 years, I should say, this person who invested $1,000 earned 10% in the first year. So in the first year, we multiplied the amount by 1.10. Now we've multiplied by 1.10 a second time, again. In other words, squared. The 1,210, that is the same thing as 1,000 times 1.10 squared. And you'll notice that the exponent here, 2, matches the year. We multiplied by 1.10 2 times, and the person now has what? $1,210 in the bank, which means $210 in interest. $210 in interest. Okay, now to give us some more room here, I have to lift some of this stuff up. So I have to erase some information. The 1,210, I'm going to bring that up a little bit. So the 1,100 turned into 1,210. As we said, the interest earned over that 2-year period was $210. All right, what about the other investor? We'll sort of separate these. She invested $2,000, and she earned 5% interest per year. So a year later, she had 2,000 times what? 1.05, 5% interest. So how much money did she have in the bank? What was the 2,000 she invested? That's still there, plus the interest. Now, what's 5% of 2,000? Just as an aside over here, it's really good to move in between fractions and decimals and vice versa. When you see 5%, that is the same as 5 over 100, which is 1 over 20. So as soon as you see 5%, as soon as you see 0.05, immediately think 1/20th. Well, what's 2,000 divided by 20? That's 100. That's 100. So $100 in interest. So at the end of the year, how much did she have in the bank? 2,100. Another year goes by, and what happens? At the end of that year, she now has 2,100 times, again, 1.05, which is how much money? So it's the 2,100 from last year, plus what's the interest? 5% of 2,100, 1/20th of 2,100. So what's that? I'll write that down here. 1/20th of times 2,100. Well, cancel the zero, so that's the same as 210 divided by 2. That is 105. 5% of 2,100 is $105. So at the end of the second year, she has $2,205. She earned $205 in interest. He earned $210 in interest. Difference $5. Answer A. If that made sense, I hope you'll click the like button, share the video with your friends who are taking the GMAT. We'll see you in the next video.